in the process of surrender, what typically reveals itself gradually is that what the reflective play offers, usually intermittently, are things that the conditioned mind has issue with. Eventually, everything that created the egoic mind, all of the subtle aspects, replicate themselves based upon sensations in the body, emotions, and situations that present themselves, all part of the reflection. And this gradual recognition that begins to occur more and more clearly is that what looks to your mind as bad, as issue, as problem, is actually the goodness that is in disguise. The appearance of dark is the light in disguise. And the way this transformation occurs is in the process of surrender, receiving. If it's an attempt to break through what appears to be dark, troublesome, to get to the experience of the light, this bypasses the whole thing. By the same token, if there is the embellishment of the mind's interpretation, the story of what is going on, likewise, it is impossible to get to the depths of the true offer. Sometimes in the energy itself, there is a story built into the energy. This occurs if there is something that arises that's never been seen before. In this case, the receiving of the story that is built in the energy is absolutely necessary, healing, transformative. Typically, though, after this has occurred, then it just repeats itself, and the story of the mind is it's deepening my process in just being with this same kind of energetic dynamic that I've been with before. When it is something new and has not been seen, then there is a story that is mixed in with the energy. And then the story becomes part of the release. Otherwise, the story separates you from the offer. Whether it is physical discomfort, something situational that feels threatening, whether it is something that just spontaneously arises. If it is revealing something new, it is receiving all of it, and receiving all of it, there will be a new seeing, subtle threads of story, because it illuminates something that hasn't been seen. But carrying a theme to a process that is occurring to someone that in truth is fictitious prevents the meeting at the roots. Meeting naked. True surrender, the surrender of my story. And then the play will organize itself in this wisdom to bring up all of the dynamics that cause the building of the creation of the experience of someone separate. The appearance of the issue is discovered to be the answer. The appearance of darkness is discovered to be the light. What is required is humility, patience, trust. Trust in a story is actually following what has been programmed to distrust. Trust in the character called me is trusting that which has pulled you away from yourself. Trust is inherent in the nature of your existence. It is not trusting some particular thing and not trusting some other particular thing. In the nature of your existence, there is nothing in particular. It trusts God's offering of the entirety of the display in which the character that represents you is a part. This is the grace of surrender. It goes into the trenches instead of bypassing the trenches in quest of some celestial realm, which is unbelievable grace if it can be accessed that way, but it is only a piece of the pie. Opening into the mind's idea of the trenches is the foremost gradual recognition that every single thing that seemed off never was. Everything that seemed that it was not in my service was always in my service. Not my service as in the myth of a separate one, but your service as you are, which is reality. What is reality? Reality is what is now. What is now is always now. Same thing over and over again in the play of self-reminding. It's just now. carries no past, carries no story. It's not found in a location, no individual found within it, untouched. From this, it is possible to receive the wisdom that the play is offering. From this place, what was conditioned to be perceived as the problem is fertile for the possibility of recognizing it is the perfect solution. It begins to release the addictive habit of doing, because underneath, doing is driven by fear that is not recognized. And what remains? This. This remains. Possibility of noticing play of phenomena passing through the space of existence, periodically setting off perhaps subtle, reactive, conditioned tendencies. Just remaining from where you are. From the love that you are, from the presence that you are. And then each time this little thread moves through, it carries a form of static away that has always been unconsciously carried. As this seeing becomes clearer, the power of fear begins to soften. Recognition becomes more clear, and the trust of every single thing begins to root itself. Even when the conditioned mind is in big distrust. Because that's going to come up. How could all of the static be released if this unconscious mindset were not to come up? Whatever is occurring in the life, in the body, almost always, not always, but almost always, there is either something subtle or something really big that is moving through. Sometimes there are gaps. But in being aware of this as it's moving through, receiving it from where you live, which is now, which has no story. It's not a separating mechanism which causes you to forget yourself is not at play. There's no story. If there is something story spinning, it's just recognizing that it makes no sense to believe thought. They're all subjective about someone you cannot find. If they're coming, just realize that it's all misunderstanding. All thought is nothing but misunderstanding. It's like listening to thought the way you would listen to someone speaking in a language that you didn't know. And then what remains is the feeling of yourself, what is alive, always, endlessly, here. And there is the receiving of this intermittent but fairly consistent various levels of energy that had been repressed, and the mind has its little response to it, and it is felt moving through, and you remain without relationship to content, unless the rare times when something brand new is occurring and there is an inherent story built into the energy itself, something that had never been seen before. So you're remaining in reality, what is now, what is here, and you're receiving in complete surrender that which is purifying everything, which is the mind's idea initially of the problem. So the conditioned shell of protection begins unraveling and melting. The relationship with the heart within begins to blossom. There begins to be the discovery that what was believed to be my heart, as the protective armoring unravels, there is the discovery that it is the seat of the beloved. It is the lotus of the heart, the true heart. The self-luminous eternal beauty that pulls the attention out of this force of pure love into itself. the East what is commonly referred to as being in the jaws of the tiger, except it is luscious, not painful. And then, in being drawn in, there is the discovery that this union of me, what really has always been me, not the story of me, and the beloved, the union, is infinite. It's everywhere. And at every single point in the eternal field, it vibrantly recognizes itself. This union. And after tastes like this, which is indescribable, it does not mean that the process of surrender and the movement of these subtle threads stop moving through the field. There is a finality to what was called my karma, what created the experience of the particular individual. But as this relationship with the field of absolute purity grows, when there has been true surrender and the protection, the egoic protection has been unraveled, then the threads that have bound all of humanity will come moving through. And in this way, misunderstanding melts into its source, and there becomes a deeper and deeper falling in love with the nature of the human play, the nature of creation. And it is all simply about feeling yourself now. The simple humility to let go of the habit of my story. And to feel the heart. And to be alert, awake to the play of this purification process of all of the subtleties that the mind, conditioned mind, saw as bad or wrong. It can be very subtle. Feeling it moving through the unmoving space that is enlivened to itself, but also receiving the aspect of its own self that created the misunderstanding and forgetting. it is so immediate and direct. It is just about this, not the perceiving of this or the story of this, but the feeling into this, feeling into the feeling of I, the feeling of heart, while being so receptive to whatever is moving through. Keenly alert to all of the subtleties. They happen quite regularly, really, when you are really alert to it. All of the little intricate subtleties in which these threads of conditioned mind move through the space of the heart, the receiver of totality. It begins becoming so natural to trust everything because it is all trustworthy. It is all perfect. The need to understand, to fix, to do just begins to dissolve. And then things are met in clarity, in the moment, free of conditioned mental relationship of an illusion called past, an illusion called my story, but open. And then every single thing that moves through, moving through quite frequently, all of these subtleties are received, and the process of purification goes on, and the relationship with the heart of the beloved that lives within deepens. The beauty becomes more luminous, and the meeting of these movements, which at times can be quite challenging, continues to purify the illusion, the dream of separation. Virtually every thought carries with it some subtle remnant of something just waiting to be received. Not in the content, in the energy. Not about some situation that has already passed. In the present. Not about someone, but about the heart of consciousness receiving these tendrils of energetic forgetfulness. So, for instance, something that many can relate to, the experience in the play of collective energy coming in, and there is the experience of pain in the heart, maybe contraction in the throat. But there is watching it from the undivided space, witnessing the subtle ways, the latent tendencies of conditioned minds' response to its interpretation. When this occurs, the conditioned habits of interpretation are received without involvement with the content, awareness that there is content going on, some disliking in the content, but in general feeling the energy of it. In the meeting of that energy, something opens. In the witnessing of subtle relationship with the content, the mechanics of it are revealed, and it just purifies. Then there is the recognition, what the mind was pointing to as constriction of heart, constriction of throat, pain, that it was actually the mind's interpretation that created the experience to begin with. So the mind is what is being purified. In the openness to receive all of the aspects that the conditioning is wanted to stay away from. And as this happens, the trust grows, the seeing grows, the purification process speeds up. The relationship with the true heart that has never been constricted, is not in location, but is eternal, infinite, in contact with its own self in every single place of its existence infinitely, so alive. That opens up more fully. This is the ultimate carrying of what the process of true surrender brings. And then there is this grip of constriction, for instance, in the heart, and the mind says, oh, not good. And then there is just this wait, looking to see who am I, feeling into the nature that is untouched without trying to get away from anything. Because what is everything is everything. It includes this, but it's everything. And then there is the witnessing of the mind's subtle strategies that have been there throughout the life, come up because of the grace of the wisdom offering what the conditioned mind has wanted to stay away from. The mechanics of it are witnessed, seeing that it's not coming from an individual, and fielding the energy as it dissolves in its own time. The thing of it is, it's not about it dissolving. If it is about this dissolving, there are subtle ways in which there is personal identification with the mind's dislike, and then it is fruitless. The nature of your being is pure happiness. If there is seeking the happiness, it is the story of the character that pulls you away from yourself. If there is the receiving of the divine wisdom from where you sit, which is now, the feeling of now, then all that has obstructed everything takes care of itself, and the feeling of the beauty that you are reveals itself to the only thing it can reveal itself to, which is itself. You know, in the nature of the play of time, not always, but most, even in the most sublime states, there are these little splinters that will kind of come in, some little niggling disturbance may be felt in this bliss, but this little disturbance that the mind is just that wasn't there. But then you remember. The grace of surrender, the willingness to remain, to receive the energy that is purifying itself. This is true surrender, which leads to true purity, which leads to true happiness. It's all been laid out. It's the grace. Not without its challenges, but also not without the recognition that every single thing is ordained by the ancient wisdom that can never be described. But all you can be is in prostration to the grace of this wisdom, appearing as everything.